Welcome to one of the most unsettling stories to come out of the Smoky Mountains. Before we dive in, drop a comment telling us where you're tuning in from and the exact time you're listening. We love seeing how far these eerie tales travel. The wind that sweeps through the pines of Tennessee in autumn carries a sound unlike any other. Locals say it's not the voice of the wind, but something older, something that remembers. In the fall of 1879, 5 men walked into the Blackwood mine near the quiet settlement of Cades Cove, and according to every official record, none of them ever came out. The Blackwood brothers, Isaiah, Elijah, and Jeremiah, entered the tunnels with 2 hired men, Thomas Green and Frederick Walsh. What happened deep underground has remained a mystery for nearly a century. The mine, now collapsed and sealed by the Tennessee Mining Authority in 1962, still hides whatever truth lies beneath its dark soil. Back in 1879, Cades Cove was a rugged little community of about 300 people, farmers, tradesmen, and miners, carving out a life in the shadow of the Smokies. The Blackwood family had lived there for 3 generations. Nathaniel Blackwood, the family patriarch, first settled the land in 1817, after earning a government grant for his service in the War of 1812. His son Abraham expanded the property, buying out neighbors who wanted to move west. One rainy season, Abraham began finding strange black stones that glittered differently than coal and weighed heavier in the hand. When he died in 1862 during the Civil War, his 3 sons inherited not only the land, but also his curiosity about what might be buried beneath it. The brothers waited until 1875, when they had enough money to start digging. Isaiah, the eldest, was ambitious and serious, married into Knoxville wealth through his wife Elizabeth Carmichael, though their marriage was strained and childless. Elijah and Jeremiah were quieter, more dedicated to their work. Jeremiah, the youngest, had even studied in Nashville and kept up with scientific journals by lamplight. By 1876, they formed the Blackwood Mining Company after finding veins of coal. But people in town whispered that the brothers were after something else entirely. Coal, they said, was just the cover for a deeper obsession. Records show that in June 1879, Isaiah traveled to Knoxville to pitch an unprecedented discovery to investors, promising enormous rewards, but refusing to explain exactly what had been found. That same summer, the brothers hired Thomas Green, a mining engineer from Pennsylvania, and Frederick Walsh, a geologist with ties to the railroad. In August, the 5 men entered the Blackwood mine, and that's where the story ends, at least in any official sense. What really happened in those tunnels remains one of the Smoky Mountains' darkest mysteries. Records once stored at the Blount County Courthouse until a fire in 1963 damaged much of the archive show that the contract signed by Thomas Green and Frederick Walsh promised unusually high pay, nearly 3 times what most men earned for similar work. One potential investor, James Harrington, wrote in his business journal that Blackwood speaks with conviction but remains frustratingly vague about the specific mineral deposits. Even more curious, both contracts included strict confidentiality clauses with harsh penalties for revealing any information about the operation. Whatever the Blackwood brothers were after, they were willing to spend a fortune and surround themselves with secrecy. According to local diaries, there was always something odd about Hollow Ridge. Martha Trentham, wife of a nearby landowner, wrote in her 1905 journal that her husband had seen the Blackwoods hauling up crates and equipment that looked nothing like mining gear, scientific instruments perhaps. Isaiah would only tell neighbors they were measuring things. Martha's journal, discovered decades later during a renovation of the old Trentham home, offers one of the few first-hand glimpses into the events of 1879. She described a dinner the Blackwoods hosted that August for their newly hired experts. Green, she noted, seemed polite but weary. Walsh, on the other hand, spoke little and observed everything like a hawk. What struck me, Martha wrote, was how the brothers deferred to him. They who never took advice from anyone. During the evening, Isaiah revealed something wrapped in cloth. Martha couldn't see it, but she recalled how both Green and Walsh reacted instantly. Walsh nearly dropped his glass, and Green demanded to know where they had found it. Jeremiah mentioned the lower seam before Elijah silenced him. The mood at the table changed completely after that. By late summer, the mine's construction was underway. Dozens of local men were hired to dig the first shaft and build the surrounding structures, though none were ever allowed inside once the real excavation began. According to payroll ledgers found in 1953, local laborers were dismissed once surface work ended in September. One of them, an elderly carpenter named Silas Cooper, told the Maryville Times in 1925 that Isaiah had made them rebuild the mine entrance twice, insisting on heavy doors that sealed tight as a drum. Cooper said it looked more like a vault than a mine shaft. He also described a second building nearby, small but strong as a fortress, with no windows and a heavy locked door. The workers nicknamed it the Strong Room. Elijah personally oversaw its construction, checking every board and nail. Inside, they brought strange brass devices, glass containers, and unfamiliar machinery. Another worker, Daniel McCoy, said they dug a circular brick-lined pit behind the strong room, 8 feet deep dry, with a metal plate at the bottom and complex machinery above it. When he asked Jeremiah what it was for, he was told it was for processing samples. McCoy didn't buy it. "I've worked in coal mines before," he told the paper, "and that wasn't like any processing I ever seen." By October, secrecy around the mine grew thicker. All local workers were dismissed, leaving only the 3 Blackwood brothers, Green and Walsh. The last known delivery, recorded at Abernathy's General Store on October 23rd, listed large amounts of kerosene salt and blank journals alongside ordinary mining tools. A note scribbled in the store ledger by the shopkeeper read, "J.B., Jeremiah Blackwood, looking unwell, thin eyes, sunken hands shaking so bad he could hardly sign. Said he wasn't sleeping, hearing noises in the walls." Less than a month later, on November 17, 1879, mail carrier Joseph Miller arrived to find the site deserted. The mine office door stood open, papers scattered everywhere, a lantern still burning on the desk. The entrance to the mine wasn't collapsed, it was locked from the inside. Joseph Miller's sworn statement to the Blount County Sheriff described more than just an abandoned mine. It described a silence so heavy, it felt alive. The air itself was holding its breath. He wrote a sense of wrongness that made the hair on his neck stand up. Only part of Miller's account made it into the official record, but his family later preserved the full version inside their Bible with the note, "This is the truth," though the sheriff wouldn't write it all down. According to that version, the strong room door was open when he arrived. Yet nothing seemed looted or broken. Papers covered in symbols and sketches lay scattered across the desk, and a glass case held strange black stones, flecked with a shimmer that seemed to move when the light changed. Behind the strong room, Miller found the brick-lined pit. The machinery was gone, but the metal plate remained scarred and gouged as though something beneath had clawed at it. The sheriff's official investigation, dated November 25, 1879, dismissed the case with cold efficiency. It stated that the Blackwood brothers and their associates appear to have abandoned their mining operation for reasons unknown. No signs of violence or foul play were evident. But the report ignored the unsettling details: the untouched equipment the horses left to starve in their stalls, a meal half-eaten on the table, and the fact that the mine had been locked from the inside. Deputy Samuel Lockwood, who helped with the search, later confided to his son that the sheriff hadn't wanted to go into the mine at all. "None of us did," Lockwood said in a family account written in 1923. There was a feeling about that place, like standing at the edge of a bottomless pit. You can't see what's down there, but you know it's looking back at you. Some places are best left alone. In December 1879, the families of Thomas Green and Frederick Walsh arrived from Pennsylvania and Massachusetts desperate for answers. They found none. With no bodies, no witnesses, and no evidence of crime, the men were simply declared missing. The mine sat abandoned ownership, lost in legal confusion. 16-year-old Sarah Green, the engineer's daughter, kept a journal of her time in Tennessee. On December 12th, she wrote, "Mother continues to press the sheriff for answers, but he has none to give or none he will share. We went to the mine today despite warnings. The forest seems to swallow it as though trying to erase what happened. I felt a pressure in the air, a weight behind my eyes. Mother says I imagine things, but she too was eager to leave." Near the sealed mine entrance, Sarah found a scrap of paper she believed came from her father's notebook. In his handwriting were 5 chilling words. "It responds to sound. God help us, it responds to sound." Back in Knoxville, Elizabeth Blackwood, Isaiah's wife, refused to travel to Cades Cove. She insisted her husband was alive and in hiding, guarding something valuable they had discovered. She filed no missing persons report, conducted no search, and eventually moved to Charleston, South Carolina, where she lived out her years in quiet seclusion. When she died in 1914, her will made no mention of Isaiah. By the following spring, Reverend William McNeil of the Cades Cove Methodist Church noted something curious in his parish records. "The locals will not go near the mine," he wrote in 1880. "They say that at night sounds come from beneath the sealed entrance, not the noises of stone or settling earth, but something else. I preached against superstition. Yet when I visited the site to offer prayers for the missing men, I too felt an unease that words cannot explain. The silence around the old Blackwood site seemed to hold its own gravity, heavy and unnatural." Reverend McNeil noted as much in his June 1880 entry, later preserved by the Methodist Historical Society. In it, he wrote that Josiah Trentham reported all the Blackwood horses sold at auction to pay lingering debts had either died or gone lame within months. The same strange misfortune followed the tools and equipment salvaged from the mine. Daniel McCoy's saw bought from the liquidation shattered in his hands. A lantern from the mine office, now owned by Adam Lawson, refused to stay lit no matter how much oil was used. "Such tales encourage superstition," McNeil wrote, "and yet the pattern is difficult to dismiss." For decades, the story of the Blackwood mine remained a local whisper, half forgotten and buried under dust and folklore until 1952, when a graduate student named Howard Reynolds from the University of Tennessee stumbled upon the case while researching Appalachian mining for his doctoral thesis. The brief references to the Blackwood disappearance caught his attention, and soon he was hooked. Reynolds began collecting old records, interviewing elderly locals, and visiting the remnants of Cades Cove himself. His research notes, now stored in the University of Tennessee archives, chart his descent from academic curiosity into obsession. "The official explanation makes no sense," he wrote in March 1953. "The Blackwoods were capable men with substantial means. Abandoning their operation without cause defies all reason. The geological data for Hollow Ridge also indicates negligible coal presence. What then were they truly after?" In pursuit of answers, Reynolds located Sarah Green, daughter of the missing engineer, Thomas Green, who by then was living in Philadelphia. Her testimony, transcribed in his field notes, brought a chilling new dimension to the mystery. "My father was a careful man," she said. "He believed in evidence, not stories. But his letters changed after he went to Tennessee. At first he wrote with excitement about promising finds about the Blackwoods' ambition. Then his tone grew troubled. He mentioned strange behaviors in the mineral samples disputes among the men and things he couldn't quite describe. His final letter came days before they vanished. She paused, Reynolds noted, before reading a single line aloud. We've gone too deep. The material changes as we descend. It's not a mineral deposit. It's something else entirely. Isaiah won't stop. Despite the warnings in Sarah Green's recollections, Thomas Green's final letters carried an unsettling mix of ambition and dread. He believes we found something that will change everything, she told Reynolds. I fear he may be right, though, not in the way he imagines. On June 12, 1953, Reynolds finally gained permission from the Tennessee Department of Conservation to visit the site of the old Blackwood mine, which by then lay inside the boundaries of the newly created Great Smoky Mountains National Park. His field notes from that visit describe the forest slowly reclaiming the remnants of the Blackwood operation, the skeletal frames of buildings rotting back into the soil, the mine entrance still faintly visible, but long since collapsed. Beneath the decayed floorboards of the former mine office, he made his most significant discovery, a corroded metal container. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages mostly ruined by time and moisture, but with several passages still legible. The handwriting matched Isaiah Blackwood's signature from county records. Reynolds transcribed what he could. The first decipherable entry, dated October 3, 1879, read, FWW confirms our suspicions regarding the unusual properties of the samples. The mineral exhibits characteristics inconsistent with any known element. When exposed to certain conditions, it demonstrates remarkable effects which I hesitate to detail even in these private pages. We have agreed to proceed with caution. Another entry, October 11th, 1879. Tunnel has reached 20 to 20 foot. The vein widens as we progress deeper. TG reports unusual temperature variations that cannot be explained by conventional geology. The instruments confirm it. We are on the right track. October 17th, 1879. Jeremiah experienced the episode again last night. He insisted he could hear them moving in the walls of his room, though we heard nothing. I fear the proximity to the samples is having an effect. We have moved the specimens to the secured chamber within the main shaft. October 21st, 1879. The sounds are no longer subjective. All 5 of us heard them today, not cave-ins or settling something else. FW suggests we seal the lower chamber and suspend operations. E disagrees vehemently. The potential value is too great to abandon. The final legible entry, November 15, 1879, 2 days before the site was found, abandoned, contained only a single line, "It is too late." They are coming through. Reynolds concluded the Blackwoods had stumbled onto something unprecedented, perhaps a rare mineral or unknown gas with extraordinary properties. He theorized that exposure to this substance might have caused hallucinations, paranoia, or other psychological effects leading to confusion, accidents, or violence underground. In his later notes from June 1953, he recorded interviews with elderly locals who still carried the old stories. Emma Davis, 91, recalled her grandmother's warnings. The Cherokee wouldn't camp there. Said the ground was wrong. It didn't hold sound right. Birds don't sing there. Even now, it's always been a quiet place, but not the peaceful kind of quiet, the hungry kind. William Trentham, grandson of Josiah and Martha, shared family stories about the Blackwoods' changing demeanor. My grandparents said Isaiah was different after they dug that first shaft. Used to be sociable, then he became withdrawn. Grandfather once overheard him telling Elijah, "It's like looking through a window into somewhere else." They thought he meant wealth or opportunity. Later, they weren't so sure. In July 1953, Reynolds requested permission to excavate the collapsed mine entrance. Park authorities denied the application, citing safety concerns. Undeterred, Reynolds shifted his focus to Hollow Ridge's geological anomalies. According to his diary, he contacted the United States Geological Survey in August 1953 to ask about any unusual deposits at the site. The official reply preserved with his papers was perfunctory. No atypical formations or minerals had ever been recorded there, only standard Appalachian coal seams. But Reynolds found a glaring discrepancy. The USGS catalog listed a geological survey of Hollow Ridge conducted in 1882, just 3 years after the Blackwood disappearance. But the report itself was missing from the archives. When he asked about it, officials told him it had likely been lost during an office move in the 1920s. Convenient, he scribbled in the margin. By September 1953, Reynolds's letters to geologists, mining historians, and archivists across the eastern United States became increasingly urgent. He began referencing time constraints and hinted at outside interference. The young scholar who had set out to solve a regional mystery was now sounding more like a man racing an invisible clock. In a letter to his faculty advisor, dated September 30th, 1953, Howard Reynolds confessed a growing fear that someone or something was watching him. "I believe I'm being followed," he wrote. "Twice this week I've seen the same man near the library while reviewing the Blackwood materials. Yesterday my apartment showed signs of entry, though nothing was taken. I've placed my most important findings in a safe deposit box. If anything should happen to me, please make sure this research continues." Just over 2 weeks later, Reynolds vanished. According to his roommate, Reynolds left their Knoxville apartment on the evening of October 17th, 1953, saying he'd made a breakthrough and needed to check something at the university library. He never returned. 3 days later, his car was discovered on a service road inside the national park, roughly 2 miles from the site of the Blackwood mine. Park rangers and local authorities launched a full-scale search across the rugged terrain, but no trace of him was ever found. The official report listed his disappearance as an accident, perhaps a misstep into one of the park's many ravines, or disorientation in the thick forest after dark. But those who knew him refused to accept that explanation. Dr. Marilyn Haywood, a geology professor who had mentored Reynolds, told university officials that the theory didn't fit. Howard was cautious, methodical, and deeply familiar with backcountry conditions, she said. The idea that he wandered unprepared into the woods at dusk makes no sense. He had recently voiced concerns about his research concerns, I dismissed at the time as academic overwork. Now I wonder if he was right to be afraid. The exact nature of those concerns was never officially recorded. However, a partial draft of Reynolds's thesis recovered from his papers contains a handwritten note in the margins, scribbled, then heavily crossed out. The geographical anomalies extend beyond the mine site. Testing indicates a radius of influence that continues to expand. The implications are staggering if confirmed. The question is no longer what the Blackwoods found, but whether they released something that cannot be contained. Nearly a decade later, in 1962, the Tennessee Mining Authority undertook a statewide survey of abandoned mine sites as part of a hazard mitigation program. The Blackwood mine, by then reduced to a shallow depression in the hillside, was selected for permanent sealing. The work was completed on November 17th, 1962, exactly 83 years to the day after Joseph Miller first found the site abandoned. The operations foreman, Robert Crowley, submitted his final report with an unusual addendum. Crew members reported auditory anomalies during closure. Several complained of headaches, nausea, and disorientation. Foreman recommends no further activity at this site. When his superiors asked for clarification, Crowley abruptly resigned. Within a month, he and his family had relocated to Ohio. All subsequent attempts to contact him failed. 5 years later, in 1967, a journalist researching Appalachian mining history tracked down one of Crowley's crewmen, James Watkins. His account shed new light on what happened that day. "We all heard it," Watkins said, "like whispering coming from inside the hill. Not words exactly, more like something trying to sound like words. Roberts got it worst. He was running the concrete mixer closest to the entrance. Said his skin felt wrong, like something was moving under it. By lunch, he was seeing things that weren't there. Crowley sent him home and finished the job himself. Next morning, Roberts couldn't remember a thing about it. The doctors called it heat exhaustion, but it was October, cool, cloudy. That wasn't heat. For years afterward, the Blackwood mine slipped back into silence, part cautionary tale, part forgotten history. But in the spring of 1967, the story resurfaced once more. During the cataloging of alumni materials at the University of Pennsylvania, archivists uncovered a series of letters among the personal effects of none other than Thomas Green, the mining engineer, who had vanished alongside the Blackwood brothers in 1879. The letters Thomas Green sent to his colleague Professor William Harrison at the University of Pennsylvania between July and October 1879 remain the most revealing evidence of what the Blackwoods may have truly unearthed. The final letter, dated October 12, 1879, is especially chilling. "The properties of this mineral defy conventional explanation," Green wrote. "It responds to electrical current in ways I've never seen, and samples in proximity to one another seem to maintain a kind of resonance regardless of distance. Isaiah believes we've discovered something revolutionary, and Walsh agrees, though he is more cautious. The brothers have begun calling it black iron, but it bears little resemblance to any ferric material. More concerning are the physical effects. Prolonged handling leaves the fingers numb for hours. Walsh has developed a persistent tremor in his right hand. Young Jeremiah complains of hearing voices when no one is speaking. At first we attributed this to the acoustics of the mine, but now I am less sure. Isaiah dismisses our concerns. He's becoming fixated on reaching the main deposit. Something about this place feels wrong, Harrison. Were it not for our contracts and the genuinely anomalous nature of the findings, I would have departed weeks ago. The locals refuse to approach the mine. They won't say why directly, but I've heard whispers the Cherokee avoided this ridge, that animals won't den here. In my darker moments, I believe them. We've sealed the lower shaft where the main vein runs deepest. Only the 5 of us have access. What we've found there, I hesitate to commit to paper. I will say only that the material becomes more concentrated as we descend, and its properties more pronounced. Isaiah is convinced we are approaching something unprecedented. He calls it the source. I have secured samples in lead containers, which seem to dampen their effects. I plan to send them to you within the fortnight with my complete notes. Should anything delay this correspondence, I trust you will make appropriate inquiries. No samples or further correspondence from Green ever reached Harrison. True to his word, Harrison made inquiries after weeks passed with no reply. But the official response in Tennessee was perfunctory at best. Letters preserved in the University of Pennsylvania archives show his growing frustration with county authorities. Harrison's personal journal, discovered among his effects after his death in 1907, reveals that he went to Tennessee himself in early 1880. His entry from January 18th reads, "The local authorities are either incompetent or deliberately obstructive. They show no interest in pursuing the matter beyond their initial cursory investigation." When I mentioned Green's final letter and its references to unusual mineral properties, Sheriff Davis became visibly uncomfortable and suggested I return to Pennsylvania and leave Tennessee matters to Tennesseans. 3 days later, on January 21st, Harrison wrote of his own visit to the mine site despite warnings. The entrance has indeed been sealed from within. Massive timbers braced against the doors. No signs of violence or struggle evident, yet the scene suggests hasty departure. Most peculiar was the silence, a profound absence of sound, extending in a perfect circle around the site. No bird song, no insect noise, not even wind, though I could see branches moving. He collected soil samples from near the entrance for analysis. His final entry concerning the trip, dated January 25, 1880, hints at something deeply unsettling. Samples proved unremarkable under initial testing. However, last night I experienced a most disturbing phenomenon. The soil was stored in my hotel room in glass vials. Harrison's final journal entry completes the picture with an image both quiet and horrifying. I was awakened by faint tapping from within the containers. When examined by lamplight, the soil appeared to move slightly, though I found no insects or organisms to explain it. I have disposed of the samples and will depart for Pennsylvania tomorrow. Some mysteries perhaps are best left unsolved. With that final line, his record ends, and so does the last direct account from anyone who ever came close to the Blackwood site in that era. For over a century, the academic consensus has held that the Blackwood incident was nothing more than an industrial accident, perhaps triggered by trapped gas pockets that produced hallucinatory effects leading to panic, collapse, and disappearance. The absence of bodies, officials argued, could be explained by the men fleeing after the disaster. Yet that theory falters in the face of several details. The sealed mine entrance, the untouched supplies, the half-eaten meals still on the table, and the sheer precision of their disappearance. More unconventional explanations began surfacing through the 20th century. Fringe journals and private researchers suggested that the so-called black iron might have been radioactive material unknown at the time, its exposure driving the men to madness. Others ventured further still, describing the phenomenon as something beyond modern science, an intrusion of forces that defy the normal laws of matter and space. In 1959, a physicist named Dr. Richard Chambers privately published a monograph that tried to unite the Blackwood case with similar reports of strange geological disturbances and vanishings across the Appalachian region. What the Blackwoods may have discovered, he wrote, is evidence of what I term thin places locations, where the boundaries of physical space grow weak, where the fabric of reality itself becomes permeable. Indigenous traditions across the world describe such places as doorways to other realms. Modern physics, through concepts like quantum entanglement and dimensional overlap, may one day find the language to explain them. Chambers's work was ignored by his peers. He lost his university position soon after publication and eventually disappeared from public record. The only surviving copy of his study resides today in the restricted archives of Miskatonic University's Special Collections. Nearly a decade later, in 1968, the last living person connected to the Blackwood events passed away. Sarah Green, daughter of the missing engineer, died at 92 in a Philadelphia nursing home. Staff recalled that during her final days, she spoke constantly of her father, muttering, "They're still in there. They're still listening." The walls got too thin at Hollow Ridge. A nurse's note dated 3 days before her death describes an incident around midnight. Mrs. Green had grown suddenly agitated, insisting she could hear her father calling to her from the other side of the wall, begging for help to come back through. When the nurse tried to calm her, Sarah fell silent for a moment and said clearly, "It's November 17th again. They always reach out on November 17th. When reminded that the date was April 23rd, she shook her head and whispered, "Time moves differently where they are." Today, the site of the Blackwood mine lies deep within an undeveloped section of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The heavy concrete seal placed in 1962 has since been overtaken by dense forest, the precise location known only to a handful of park historians. Rangers strongly discourage off-trail exploration in the Hollow Ridge area, citing unstable terrain and fragile ecosystems. Still, hikers who stray too close to the old coordinates report strange experiences, moments of disorientation, sudden waves of dread, or the feeling of being watched. Park Service logs list dozens of cases describing faint whispers, metallic hums, or muffled vibrations beneath the ground. Each report clusters within a narrow 2-mile radius of where the Blackwood entrance once stood. In several cases, hikers became inexplicably separated from their groups, later found dazed and unable to explain where they'd gone. And in 1956, before the area was permanently sealed, a Vanderbilt geologist named Dr. Eleanor Mott conducted a final series of soil and rock analyses from Hollow Ridge. Her published papers are perfectly ordinary, offering no hint of anything unusual but the private notes Dr. Eleanor Mott left behind after her retirement tell a very different story. In them, she refers to Site BW7, widely believed to be her coded designation for the Blackwood mine location. The samples she collected there, she wrote, displayed unusual electromagnetic properties that warranted further investigation. She submitted a formal funding request to expand her research. It was denied. After that, she abandoned the work entirely. When contacted in 1967 by researchers investigating the disappearance of Howard Reynolds, Mott refused to discuss her findings. She offered only one cryptic comment: "Some doors are better left closed." Tennessee authorities made the right decision to seal that place permanently. A former graduate assistant who had worked under Mott later spoke to a reporter on condition of anonymity, providing a more detailed and more disturbing account. "The samples from Hollow Ridge weren't like anything else we'd studied," the assistant said. "They absorbed light in a way that didn't make sense, like the edges of the rocks blurred into shadow. But the audio tests were worse. When we played back recordings of the samples at high volume, you could hear something like voices, not feedback, not static. Actual voices speaking words that almost made sense." Dr. Mott destroyed the tapes after listening to them for days. She said they'd started saying specific things to her personal things. That's when she shut it all down. Even the United States Geological Survey's work in the area hints at anomalies. In 1963, during a large-scale mapping project of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, the USGS, published reports containing a peculiar omission. A circular area roughly 4 miles across, centered on Hollow Ridge, marked simply topography unverified due to instrument malfunction. No explanation was offered. Dr. James Collins, a geologist on the USGS team, who later became a professor at the University of Michigan, briefly addressed the issue in a 1972 interview for an academic journal. "Some areas of the park presented unusual challenges for mapping," he said. "Equipment that functioned perfectly elsewhere produced inconsistent results in certain locations. Rather than publish inaccurate data, we acknowledged the limitations of our survey." When the interviewer pressed him specifically about Hollow Ridge, Collins abruptly ended the conversation. The journalist noted that his hands were visibly trembling at the mention of the location. What are we to make of this fractured trail of evidence? 5 men vanishing into the earth in 1879. A researcher following their story, disappearing 74 years later. Workers and scientists fleeing from phenomena they couldn't explain. Each event on its own might be dismissed as coincidence. But together they form a pattern that bends uncomfortably close to something unearthly. The Blackwood mine remains a historical riddle, a case where every documented fact refuses to lead to a satisfying conclusion. Perhaps the most unsettling words linked to the case came from Frederick Walsh, the geologist who vanished alongside the Blackwood brothers. according to a letter written by local shopkeeper Abigail Lawson to her sister on November 10, 1879. Walsh visited her store just days before the disappearance. He appeared pale and shaken, like a man who hadn't slept in days. When she asked what troubled him, he reportedly said, "We've breached something down there we don't understand. Isaiah thinks it's a mineral deposit, but I'm no longer sure it's a thing at all. It might be a place, a thin spot. And now that we've opened it, I don't think it can be closed again." Before leaving, he added softly, "Some things weren't meant to be found. Some spaces weren't meant to be entered." In the months that followed, unease settled over Cades Cove like a lingering fog. Several families abandoned their homes without explanation, and by 1881, the town's population had fallen by nearly 20%. Church records from that time describe special prayer gatherings held for protection against unseen influences. A petition discovered decades later in the archives of the Cades Cove Baptist Church sheds further light. Dated December 1879 and signed by 47 residents, it urged county authorities to seal the Blackwood mine permanently and declare the land unfit for habitation. The petition cited strange occurrences since the mine's abandonment, livestock found dead without wounds, children describing shadowy figures at the tree line, and voices calling to townspeople in the familiar tones of loved ones who were far away or long dead. The document was received by the county clerk, but marked simply filed for consideration. Within half a year, nearly all the signatories had left the valley. Throughout Appalachia, stories of haunted hollows and cursed ridges are as old as the mountains themselves. Most are dismissed as folklore, born of isolation and fear of the unknown. But the Blackwood affair stands apart. Its details, preserved in official records, business filings, and academic correspondence, point not to superstition, but to something encountered by educated, pragmatic men who tried to understand it with reason and failed. A curious pattern appears in property records after the disappearance. Despite the potential value of the land, no one ever attempted to claim the Blackwood estate. The property reverted to the county for unpaid taxes and eventually became part of the national park. Even during the resource-hungry decades of the early 20th century, when corporations bought up land across Appalachia for coal and timber, Hollow Ridge remained conspicuously untouched. An internal survey from 1927 by the Eastern Tennessee Coal and Timber Corporation, later unearthed in university archives, includes a single line about the Blackwood tract site deemed unsuitable for development, despite favorable geological indicators. Local labor refuses to work location, recommend alternative acquisition. So what exactly did the Blackwoods uncover beneath Hollow Ridge? Was their black iron a form of toxic mineral or gas that poisoned their minds and bodies, causing hallucinations and madness? Or, as Walsh hinted in his final days, did they open something that was never meant to be opened at all? In 1965, nearly a century after the disappearance, Park Service employees conducting forest maintenance discovered something peculiar. Roughly a mile from the old mine site, a perfect circle of dead vegetation about 30 feet across. Soil tests revealed no toxins, no radiation, no biological cause. The official report closed with the sterile phrasing "cause undetermined. Area to be monitored for changes or expansion." By 1967, the clearing near Hollow Ridge had expanded to 40 feet across a perfect vegetation-free circle. No photographs of the site exist in public records, an omission all the more curious given that standard park procedures require photo documentation of unusual ecological features. The location is not labeled on any publicly available park maps. The concrete seal installed over the mine in 1962 has never been breached, and no further excavation attempts have been authorized. The University of Tennessee still holds Howard Reynolds' research notes, but access is restricted to credentialed scholars with institutional approval. Likewise, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park maintains no official reference to the mine in its public materials. Even the few mentions in county or park records are fragmented, vague, and often redacted. Perhaps the most telling evidence of official unease comes from an internal memo circulated within the Department of the Interior in 1965, obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request in 1988. The memo concerns a former mining site at coordinates blacked out within the GSM-NP boundaries. It directs all inquiries to the regional office and explicitly forbids unauthorized research or excavation at the location. Ranger patrols are to be conducted in pairs and restricted to daylight hours. No reason is given for these extraordinary precautions. When pressed in 1988, department officials offered the boilerplate explanation of unstable ground conditions and possible environmental hazards from 19th century mining practices. Yet former park ranger Michael Gaines, who served in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park from 1963 to 1969, told a different story in a 2001 interview for a regional history journal. There were places in the park we were told to avoid or approach only with strict protocols, he said. Hollow Ridge was one of them. The official line was safety concerns, but the rules felt excessive for old mine shafts. We were instructed never to hike there alone and to carry two-way radios at all times, gear we didn't use in most other parts of the park back then. Gaines recalled one patrol in the summer of 1967 with another ranger, David Chin. About a mile from the old mine site, we found a clearing that wasn't on any of our maps. Perfect circle, maybe 40 feet across, no vegetation at all. The ground felt strange underfoot, vibrating slightly, almost humming. Dave said he could hear whispering. I didn't hear anything myself, but I could feel something. We reported it when we got back to headquarters. The next day, a team from the regional office showed up and cordoned off the area. We were reassigned to other sectors. I never heard another word about it. Today, hikers who stray near Hollow Ridge describe the same phenomena recorded over a century ago. A heavy, unnatural silence that seems to swallow sound. Birds fall quiet. The wind dies. Some report a sensation of being watched from the tree line. Others say they hear faint murmurs, words just beyond comprehension, carried by no breeze at all. Most people dismiss these impressions as folklore, layered on top of old history. The human mind, they say, is prone to creating patterns where none exist, especially in places with a reputation for mystery. And yet, the pattern around Hollow Ridge has persisted for more than a century. The unnatural silence, the disappearances, the sealed mine no agency seems eager to revisit. Researchers who abandon their studies without explanation, and the quiet but unmistakable warnings that circulate through official channels. Dr. Lillian Hart, a geophysicist who attempted a ground-penetrating radar survey of the area in 1992, later described her experience in a private letter that was leaked to paranormal researchers. The equipment malfunctioned in a way I've never seen before or since, she wrote. Not simple failure, active corruption of the data. The limited readings her team captured showed what appeared to be hollow spaces plunging far deeper than any coal mine in the region, hundreds of feet below the surface in patterns that didn't match conventional excavation. More troubling still, some of the anomalies seemed to move between scans. When the team returned the following day to verify the results, they found their survey markers displaced and their equipment tampered with, yet there were no footprints or signs of human intrusion. Hart's University declined to fund a follow-up investigation, and her findings were never published. She quietly shifted her research focus to less controversial sites in the American Southwest. The anomalies around Hollow Ridge have left traces in other records as well. U.S. Forest Service files show that in 1977, a selective timber harvest was planned for a section of the park encompassing the ridge. The operation was abruptly canceled after the initial survey. The public explanation cited nesting habitats of protected species, yet no specific wildlife protection zones were ever designated. Internal memos obtained through a later FOI request reveal that 2 survey members reported extreme disorientation and auditory hallucinations while working near the former mine site. In 1983, a group of spelunkers from the Tennessee Cave Survey attempted to locate and map natural cave systems in the Hollow Ridge area. Their expedition report includes a peculiar entry. Thermal imaging had revealed a cold zone about 200 feet below the surface. Near the old Blackwood coordinates, a temperature anomaly inconsistent with groundwater or typical cave formations. The team also reported equipment failures and strange acoustic effects underground. Their recommendation for a larger, better-equipped follow-up expedition was never acted upon. The project was later marked completed with no explanation. What did Isaiah Blackwood really find under Hollow Ridge? Perhaps he found exactly what he was searching for. Something revolutionary, unprecedented, valuable beyond measure. Perhaps in their ambition, the brothers crossed a boundary that should have remained untouched. Perhaps what they uncovered is still there behind the concrete seal and tons of collapsed rock waiting. Or perhaps, as Walsh warned in his final days, it's no longer contained at all. Even decades later, strange signs continued to emerge. In 1965, a hunter named Martin Graves reported discovering unusual carvings on tree trunks deep in the forest near Hollow Ridge. He described them as similar to markings Thomas Green had sketched on the strange mineral samples. A series of concentric circles with lines radiating outward, like a child's drawing of the sun, but more precise alongside angular shapes resembling letters from no known alphabet. Park rangers investigated, but found nothing. Graves maintained until his death in 1967 that the markings were real and recent. His last statement on the matter is preserved in park files. They looked fresh, like they'd been carved the day before, and they led away from the ridge, not toward it. What are we to make of this fragmented history? 5 men entered a mine in 1879 and vanished without explanation. A researcher retracing their steps disappeared 74 years later in the same location. Workers sealing the mine reported phenomena they could not explain. Scientists who studied the ridge walked away from their findings without publishing. Officials have restricted documents, closed files, redacted maps, and offered only thin explanations about safety or environmental concerns. The pattern suggests something beyond conventional causes, but stops short of offering proof. The description of markings seen by Hunter Martin Graves in 1965, concentric circles and radiating lines, like an alien alphabet, bear striking similarity to symbols carved into stone fragments Joseph Miller noticed near the mine entrance in 1879. The records of the Blackwood Mining Company, sealed in the Tennessee State Archives, remain classified as historically significant but off-limits to the public under the pretext of unresolved mineral rights. Attempts by journalists and historians to access these documents have been consistently denied. In 1995, an environmental impact study monitored air and water quality throughout the national park. One testing station about 3 miles from Hollow Ridge repeatedly returned anomalous readings, elevated electromagnetic activity with no apparent source. The anomaly appeared in preliminary reports, but vanished from the final published study. Years later, a member of the assessment team, Dr. Samuel Carter, privately admitted that the explanation of equipment contamination was fabricated. We were instructed to remove those findings from the report, he told colleagues in 1997. No explanation was given beyond national security concerns. I've done this work in 3 other national parks. I've never been asked to alter data. Whatever is happening near Hollow Ridge, someone doesn't want it documented. A geological survey using satellite imaging in 2001 revealed yet another anomaly, a subtle but distinct gravitational irregularity centered on the former mine site. The finding was flagged for further investigation, but was quietly reclassified, the data removed from public databases. The scientist who identified it, Dr. Rebecca Liu, was transferred to another department soon after. And so, the Blackwood brothers remain a footnote in Appalachian history, a curiosity in papers about 19th century industry or regional folklore. Most assume the brothers and their associates died in a conventional tragedy, victims of a cave-in or toxic gas. Few consider Frederick Walsh's final recorded words to a shopkeeper. "We've breached something down there we don't understand. Isaiah thinks it's a mineral deposit, but I'm no longer sure it's a thing at all. It might be a place, a thin spot. And now that we've opened it, I don't think it can be closed again." In the decades after the disappearance, families quietly left Cades Cove. By 1881, the population had dropped 20%. Church records show an increase in prayer meetings and petitions to seal the mine permanently. County officials filed the paperwork and did nothing. No one ever claimed the Blackwood property. Even at the height of Appalachian resource development, when timber and coal companies devoured every acre, Hollow Ridge remained untouched. Today, the site lies within an unmarked section of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The concrete seal poured in 1962 has never been breached. The dead zone, first documented as a 30-foot circle of lifeless ground in the 1960s, has grown slowly and steadily. By 1967, it measured 40 feet. By the 1990s, over 70. Nothing grows there. Insects will not cross its boundary. GPS and radio signals fail inside it. Visitors who stumble upon the place describe an overwhelming urge to leave. Those who resist say they hear voices, often familiar voices, calling from just beyond the tree line. A ranger interviewed in 2003 who requested anonymity put it plainly, "I've worked in 6 national parks over 20 years. Every park has its legends. Most are just campfire stories. But Hollow Ridge is different. The accounts are too consistent, too many years, too many credible sources. And there's the circle to consider. The most recent documented incident occurred in 2005. When 2 graduate students conducting authorized botanical research near Hollow Ridge went missing for 72 hours. They were later found 5 miles from their last known location, disoriented but unharmed, with no memory of the missing time. One resigned from the project immediately. The other changed academic fields from botany to computational linguistics, citing a sudden, inexplicable interest in patterns of communication beyond conventional language. On the back page of Isaiah Blackwood's recovered journal, nearly erased by time, a single line remains legible. It is the only surviving sentence from his final entry. "We thought we were opening a mine. We thought we were opening a mine. We were opening a door." The Blackwood mine remains sealed. The forest has long since reclaimed the site. The mountains keep their secrets, and perhaps for all our sakes, that is for the best. Yet one last document suggests the story may not be over. In the archives of the Knoxville Historical Society, among Elizabeth Blackwood's personal papers, lies a letter she received in 1895, 16 years after her husband's disappearance. The envelope bears no return address and no postmark, suggesting it was delivered by hand. Experts who have examined it say the handwriting matches Isaiah Blackwood's with subtle distortions, as if written under duress or under conditions not entirely normal. The letter contains only 3 lines. The door opens both ways. We found the way in. They found the way out. Listen for them in the silence between words. Analysis of the paper in 1972 revealed trace elements of an unidentifiable mineral with unusual electromagnetic properties. The letter is now sealed in a lead-lined container, its access severely restricted. The wind still howls through the pines of Tennessee's Smoky Mountains with a particular tone in autumn. Those who have heard it say it carries echoes not of animals or storms, but of something else entirely, something that whispers from deep within the earth. Something that waits, and sometimes in the perfect silence of Hollow Ridge where birds never sing. And leaves fall without sound, the waiting ends. The whispering grows clearer. The air thins. And for a moment, the boundaries between here and elsewhere, between now and then, between those who disappeared and those who remained, dissolve like morning mist. If the accounts are to be believed in those moments, you can hear the Blackwood brothers still working in their mine, still digging, still searching, still opening doors that should never have been opened. You can hear Thomas Green's instruments ticking and measuring. You can hear Frederick Walsh's warnings, too late to heed, and beneath it all growing louder with each passing year, you can hear something else. Something that found its way through the door they opened. Something spreading patient and persistent through the thin places of the world. Something that knows your name and will whisper it when you're alone in the dark. The rangers of Great Smoky Mountains National Park maintain no official record of these phenomena. Inquiries about Hollow Ridge or the Blackwood mine are redirected to historical archives or geological surveys. The circle of dead earth continues to expand unremarked and unacknowledged. The silence deepens. The whispering grows louder for those who know how to listen. Somewhere in the bureaucratic labyrinth of government archives, a file exists with a simple directive regarding the area. No access, no excavation, no recording equipment. Maintain containment protocols until permanent solution can be implemented. The file is dated 2007. The permanent solution remains unspecified. The Blackwood brothers went into the mountains seeking wealth. They found something else entirely. Something that continues to echo through the years, calling to those who might open the door once again. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, listen carefully. In the silence between your thoughts, in the space between heartbeats, you might hear them too. And if you do, if you hear a voice that sounds like your own calling from just beyond the wall, remember the fate of the Blackwood brothers. Some doors once opened can never truly be closed again.